You guys have been to Paris together before, is that right? I've seen a picture of you guys pointing at the Eiffel Tower.
We have been to Paris together
What
before.
year was that?
I was the third wheel. It was 2024.
Wow. No.
I mean,
it's 2024.
It was 2004.
You jet lagged, Jerry?
This is the 20-year anniversary of our first Paris visit.
That's beautiful.
Yes.
How has it changed since?
Well, we got a little more money now.
I meant Paris, not you.
No, we got a little more money now, so we can actually
go and see things.
Yeah, like we don't have to do it on a budget anymore.
It is Wednesday, July 24th. I'm Ava Wallace, a sports reporter at The Post, and this is the very first episode of The Sports Moment, the Washington Post's new pop-up podcast and your ticket to the Summer Olympics. I'm here in Paris along with many other colleagues, two of whom are my very first guests. Jerry Brewer is a sports columnist. Thank you for being here, Jerry.
Thank you. This is your opening ceremony, so I'm happy to be a part of it.
And Rick Maese is a veteran sports features writer. Thanks for being here, Rick.
I'm not that veteran.
You're pretty veteran, I would say.
Thank you for having me.
So you guys are getting settled in. Jet lag is not too bad. We've got some crazy weeks ahead of us. How many Olympics is this for you, Jerry?
This is number 7 for me.
Okay. Rick?
This is number 8.
Can you give me a tip for feeling good? And I feel like there's so much anxiety leading up to the Olympics because we are here for a few days before the opening ceremony start to get adjusted to the time zone. What are your
It is a marathon, not a sprint.
Mm-hmm.
You got to pace yourselves.
You're talking about lunches and dinners?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mostly
Mm-hmm.
wine consumption.
Right. Okay.
Don't go too crazy the first week.
Okay.
We got opening ceremony still a few days away, so there's a lot of stuff that's going to happen after that. So you got to be ready.
I have to remember that. So Jerry and Rick are just a couple of voices that you can expect to hear on this show. We've got a very deep bench of reporters here in Paris, the biggest team we've ever sent from the Post to an Olympics. A couple of them are focused on specific sports like track, gymnastics, swimming, basketball. But Rick, you're going to be doing a little bit of everything. That's right?
I hope so. I'm going to start out at the swimming pool, and then for the second week, track usually takes center stage. So I'll spend a lot of time at the track and seeing what the Americans do there.
And Jerry, anything you're particularly interested in columnizing?
Well, everyone wants to see how Simone Biles is going to perform, but my biggest standard at the Olympics is how many sporting events can I see? My Olympic record, personal record, is 14.
Wow.
And I would like to exceed that.
Do you have a spreadsheet?
No, it's just in the dome.
Oh.
I have very good callback, Ava.
Well, I will be bringing you these episodes throughout the games. So we're going to break down everything you need to know in Paris about what's going on. So hit follow right now wherever you're listening. In this initial episode today, I want to do a little bit of table setting before the opening ceremonies, as we've been mentioning. Those are taking place on Friday, and I also want to talk about what it's like for the games to be here in Paris and some athletes to watch out for this year. Unlike you guys, this is only my third Olympics. The other two were during the pandemic. I covered Tokyo, the delayed games in 2021, and then the Winter Games in Beijing in 2022. So I feel like there's nary a trace of the pandemic here, and this Paris Games really feels like a big page turner in so many ways for the Olympic movement, for the games themselves, a lot of ways for major organized sporting events. Jerry, what kind of evidence have you seen of that this Olympics really feels like a fresh start?
Yeah, those were dire and traumatic. So let's just put those way back in our mind. And it's the interaction that you have with the city and the better interaction that you have with the athletes. I get off the plane and I see, part of Great Britain's team at the airport. I don't know why I didn't take the train, but, no questions. I'm walking and it's like, oh, that's the Australian basketball team. And, you recognize a couple of them because they play in the NBA. And so being able to just walk the streets and feel the connection with the city, being able to, when they get the opportunity in and around competition, to see them in limited spaces out and about, not just at the Olympic Village. That's what the Olympics are about. It is about a connection, and it's about the world, at least small representations of the world, coming together and having a good time.
You know what's already kind of cool about this Olympics is sometimes you go to games and it feels like you're in a total bubble. It's like a pop-up city that only exists for 3 weeks, and it's just this Olympicville. That's not the case here. It feels like we are in Paris. We are not just going shuttle to stadium to media workroom. We're out and about, and we're getting a sense of the people and the culture and the flavor. And I feel like that's going to make this Olympics just very different, not just from the past few, but from many games. Paris is going to be front and center for so many different events, and the whole thing is just going to be very French flavored. I'm really looking forward to that.
A lot of people smoking cigarettes.
Yeah.
A lot of middle-aged people really well dressed. That's when you know you're in Paris.
Dinner last night, I just sat there and kind of like watched the street. And it is also helpful that I thought it was going to be like 100 degrees here in August, like it was last year. And, Paris, like most cities, has been facing extreme heat. It's just absolutely lovely. Rick, I know you're getting out, I think, to Rugby Sevens at Stade de France, which is, I hope to see that venue because it's going to be, I think it's going to be really magnificent. But what are you expecting crowd sizes? Right now, it is so quiet in Paris. Where are all these people coming from? Like, where are the people? How many are we going to see?
Most of the games don't start until Saturday. Mm-hmm. So I think the crowds are going to be trickling in the next few days. Mm-hmm. But the reason I wanted to go to Rugby Sevens, because that's the first event. That's the first thing on the calendar. And I think it's your first taste of what Paris is going to be like and what the crowds are going to be like and the energy is going to be like. Rugby's a big deal. Maybe not back in the U.S., but it's a big deal for a lot of countries. And the stadium's going to be sold out. It's going to be 69,000 fans watching Rugby Sevens. And U.S. is playing France right out of the gate. And I just think it's going to be a great opportunity to kind of take the temperature and get a sense of what things are going to feel like for the next 2.5 weeks here.
What's your favorite rule in rugby, Rick?
I like the first rule.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The second one's good. The third, But I mean, they're all such good rules.
All the rules are good.
Yeah.
One thing I know is that the rugby rules are good. Jerry, you're looking into the venues, right? And kind of how Paris is transforming and really using the city and not building a bunch of new stuff, but kind of turning these historic landmarks like beach volleyball is going to take place on the sand in front of the Eiffel Tower. How important is that backdrop? That's something that I really missed in Tokyo, is I was looking forward to seeing the city and seeing that kind of like how the Olympics imprinted themselves. We're going to actually get to see it this time in Paris.
Yeah, that's my favorite part of the games. Mm-hmm. What is a city like when the Olympics descends upon that city? And then when you go to the best cities in the world, which Paris obviously is one of them, does it feel like the Olympics are everywhere, or is there somewhere that you can escape? And Paris, with its art, its architecture, its culture, how they're going to be able to bake sports into that, I think you're going to see, in some instances, the marriage of sport and art. And we don't think always about sweaty competition as an artistic endeavor. However, I think when you look at the background of some of these and then just the athleticism, I think you will think of the marriage of sport and art.
And right out of the gate with the opening ceremonies, too. Like, that is going to be a show. I think it's been a long time since we've really looked forward to an opening ceremonies with kind of a sense of curiosity and wonder. I think we're all curious to see how it plays out because it's going to be unlike any opening ceremony we've ever seen before.
Yeah, speaking of using kind of those monuments and beautiful architectural buildings, another thing that Paris has done is they've used their natural resources too. The opening ceremonies for the first time is going to be out in the open, not in a stadium, and athletes will be arriving on boats going down the Seine. And I'm genuinely looking forward to see the different boats, like how they're going to be decorated. Are there going to be flags on them, or are they just going to be regular boats?
We should get a boat. You think we can rent one and kind of throw it in the tail end of the parade?
We have an editor in the room. Joe, do you think we can rent a boat?
I'll look into it.
I walked that route for several hours, and the security, there are like 3 levels of security. And as media, you were able to get kind of to the middle, but there's still like a ton of stuff that you don't see. And you can see where there are temporary bleachers set up for where media and other dignitaries along the route. But it's going to be so divided. But in theory, Paris is saying, well, 300,000 people are going to be able to see this, but you're not going to have a stadium where 70 to 100,000 of them are basically shoulder to shoulder. And so I'm really interested in seeing how that's going to work.
Yeah, it kind of dovetails into one of the major themes that I think is going to run through this entire games. And it's really about spectacle this year. Like, we want to make you fall in love with the Olympics again as a viewer, as an athlete, as someone who cares about sports, as someone who cares about culture.
It is. I mean, the opening ceremony, maybe it's going to be great. Maybe it's going to flop on some level. We're going to remember it. It's going to be a show that we're going to talk about that day and for weeks and, maybe years to come. We're going to remember how this thing goes down, and it's going to be different.
Is that all Rick, that Paris has to do to have this be considered a successful Olympics, do you think? Just be memorable?
Yes and no. I mean, the bar is a little bit low, right? The Olympic movement is waned a little bit. We've had 3 straight games in Asia. Television ratings have kind of lagged a little bit. The time difference has made it maybe a little bit less relevant for some parts of the world. And so I think people are kind of curious to see, where's the movement today? Is the excitement there? Is it coming back? And I think Paris is the kind of city that, is going to attract the eyeballs and the attention. And not only will it tell us where the Olympic movement is today, but where it's going.
Jerry, you were kind of mentioning the security along the Seine and everything. Are there indicators that you look for that let you know how well a games is being organized? Like, is there something you saw that you were like, oh, this is going to go off without a hitch?
Well, first, the games have to be safe. You don't want to have any incidents beyond just normal protest. That's the first thing. But ultimately, this is about great athletes doing spectacular things in front of people who are wowed. And I think the Athens Olympics in 2004, my first one, Rick's first one, they were a fantastic games in terms of performances. And everybody got over the fact that Greece was kind of doing the Olympics like in
Seat
real
of their
time.
Pants, yeah.
All I ever heard that entire Olympics is, you Americans live to work, we work to live. And it turned out fine. But there have been other Olympics that you would consider highly organized, and you're like, this was bland and this was terrible. And so in a lot of ways, like I look at these games almost like I look at Paris, and that at the end of the day, what do Parisians do? They sit at cafes, sit side by side, look at what's beautiful and look at everybody passing by. And I kind of feel like that's how Paris is oriented. Like, if worst comes to worst, just sit down in one of our stadiums and look at our beautiful architecture and watch some athletes do what they do.
That's how I feel sitting side by side in this hotel room with you guys as we record this podcast. Up ahead, we've got a preview of some of the athletes who are already creating buzz before the Summer Games and who you guys are going to want to watch out for. That's after the break. So as someone who travels a lot for work and is minorly obsessed with packing, Rick, I loved the story that you wrote about how athletes get all their kind of weird gear to international competitions, kayaks, horses, things like that. What has it been like for athletes getting ready for these Olympic Games? Can you tell us a little bit about what you reported there?
Yeah, I mean, it's just something that I've always wondered. You go to so many Olympics and it's easy for the athlete to get there. They hop on an airplane and travel. And, if you're a sprinter, you might have your track shoes that you got to take with you, or your Speedos if you're a swimmer. But the pole vaulter has a 17-foot pole. And so I always wonder, like, how do they get that across an ocean to compete with? And so I just kind of asked around athletes over several months, how are you getting your stuff to the games? And, there's simply no easy way for a lot of them. Sometimes they ship it, via cargo, and that's what they do for sailing, kayaks, canoes. We have equestrian events here with a horse. Well, you can't take a horse with you on like a buddy pass on Southwest Airlines. And they actually have a horse airlines, and they board these horses into these giant boxes, and they fly with vets, and they go overseas several weeks early. They got their own little horsey passports. Every sport has some kind of logistics like that. And it's just like us with a lot of things. Like, they have Apple Air trackers that they make sure their equipment actually lands where they need it. Because, if you're a BMX athlete and you need your bike, or a skateboarder needs your skateboard, they have the same packing anxieties that we all do when we're getting ready for a big trip.
I think it also reminded me of something that I learned very early on when I first started getting into sports and getting into the Olympics, is a lot of times these athletes are paying for extra baggage fees. Someone's mom driving their pole, like strapping their poles on a car and driving 30 hours to get to competition. A lot of times, these athletes are pushing themselves to the Olympics and generating a lot of their own momentum when I got to pack this, I got to pay for this bag. This is,
and remember, most of these athletes aren't LeBron. They're not millionaires. So it is tough. And I talked to one shooter, her name's Mary Tucker. It's her second Olympics. And, she paid $700 just to fly her heavy guns and equipment. And that was more than her airplane ticket. But, you kind of need it. So you don't have any choice. She says, you just, buckle up and do it.
Rick, you mentioned that most of these athletes are not LeBron. LeBron James actually will be here, though, and it was announced this week that he will be the male flag bearer for the U.S. delegation. Jerry, what's the significance of that? And are you surprised, I guess? I wonder if when you found out that LeBron would be competing in his first international competition since 2012, I think, if you were immediately like, oh yeah, well, he's carrying the flag.
No, I didn't think that. I forgot because he's had 12 years off that this is his fourth Olympics. And to hear LeBron talk about it, he was a 19-year-old, his first games, bronze medal. A massive disappointment for Team USA with NBA players, the first time they hadn't won gold. And then he was part of what they called the Redeem Team in 2008 and another great team in 2012. I think he thought his work was done for USA basketball and that it was back in a strong number one position. And it hasn't been over the past few years in the World Championships. So he's back to try to help them reclaim. And this may be the most accomplished group of NBA players, maybe since the Dream Team. And they're a massive draw. They made a lot of money going between Las Vegas, Abu Dhabi, and London to get here, but they're barely beating people. And so worldwide basketball on the men's stage is going to be a big part of the Olympics. The Team USA Women, which is one of the most dominant entities, USA women's basketball in the Olympics, period, right now, they'll be a significant story. And let's not forget, Brittany Griner will be really overseas for the first time since her detainment in Russia.
Yeah, and the men's team played in Abu Dhabi and Vegas was for training camp. Abu Dhabi was where they played exhibitions. Not all teams do that, of course. The soccer teams, basketball teams do. But Rick, you were at swimming trials, which is kind of the big pre-event for the swim team.
Yeah, every athlete, every team gets here a different way. But some sports, you got to go and actually win a meet, win a tournament, and that's how you punch your ticket. And so we were at swim trials in Indianapolis in a football stadium for the first time, where the U.S. swim team was selected, and kind of gives you a little preview of what's possible. Not just which athletes are going to go, but which world records are going to be challenged. And it sure seems like the swimming competition here could be one for the record books.
Yeah, if LeBron is one of the American faces of these games, Katie Ledecky is certainly another. What are you expecting from her after seeing her at trials?
Yeah, like LeBron, Katie Ledecky feels like she's been around for a long time. And her first Olympics was 2012 in London. She was 16 years old. She's a little bit older now, but she's also got 7 gold medals, and she is as strong as ever in some events. She's a freestyle specialist. She will be a favorite in both the 800 and the 1500. Probably see her in a relay as well. And then she'll be in the 400 and what many people are calling the race of the century. And on the men's side, Caleb Dressel didn't even make the world championship team. And he's kind of talked about, in vague terms, he's talked about his own mental health struggles. And he's back, and he had a strong trials. And he's going to be another person we're going to watch and see if he's able to kind of recapture some of that magic we saw, in the Tokyo lead up. So there's so many great Americans, and really the overarching storyline at the pool this year is going to be Americans versus Aussies. Americans have been dominant for so long, and Australia chipped and pecked away at them, and at World Championships won more gold medals. So the Americans, are not going to take that lying down, and it's going to be a fun battle every day. And everyone's going to have all eyes on the medal table to see where the Americans and Aussies stack up against each other.
I'm really looking forward to seeing the tennis because it's at Roland Garros, where the French Open takes place every year on this beautiful red clay. Rafael Nadal is going to play singles. He's also going to play doubles with Carlos Alcaraz, another kind of electric young Spaniard. I'm really looking forward to getting out to the tennis. Anything else you guys want to see?
Well, track being on the other side of swimming, right? Like that, these are the two dominant bookend U.S. events with major competition. Swimming has been so much greater for multiple Olympics than USA track. And I think this might be the year they track and say that they're back. And for USA track, we have to win the most medals, have to win the most golds, but we got to dominate the sprints. And we haven't dominated the sprints in a long time because of Jamaica. And Sha'Carri Richardson, brilliant 100 meters. She'll be in the 4x100 as well as the anchor leg. Noah Lyles, who will be going for at least 3 gold medals, 100, the 200, the 4x100. And then, of course, there's Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone, who I am fascinated with because she has become an absolute superstar in track and field, running an event that is not a high-profile event. She's 400-meter hurdles. She runs the 400-meter hurdles faster than world-class athletes just run the straight 400.
Better than I can walk in a straight line, yes.
And there is some buzz that Sydney may make the 4x100 team, which would just be an insane split. just a phenomenal athlete.
Rick, is there anybody you're looking forward to watching?
I mean, there's a bunch. I mean, Simone Biles, I think the whole world
Sure.
is curious to see how she performs. And
Who's
the
that? Sorry.
The whole U.S. Gymnastics team, they're going to be in the spotlight for many days here. The U.S. women's soccer team, very curious how they rebound. It's a new group, a new kind of culture and attitude around that team. And there's some events where it's not actually the athletes of the performance. I'm kind of curious about the spectacle. Some of the new kind of younger sports, skateboarding is going to be cool. I'm very curious how breakdancing's received. You talk to people and they kind of they're taken aback that breakdance is even in the Olympics, but it was in the kind of youth Olympics a few years ago, and it was stole the show. People flocked to it. Oh. And I think once you actually see it and you kind of see the athleticism and the artistry, and it's not that different from gymnastics or figure skating. These are sports set to music with costumes, and there's just so much strength and athleticism on display that I'm very curious how that kind of resonates with people.
Tell me something, Jerry, that wouldn't make tomorrow's paper. I feel like whenever I cover an Olympics, there are so many little details and observations that I have that I would never put in a story, but it's something I learned or someone I talk to. So what's something funky that's happened to you?
There's a high level of anxiety for me with, it feels like the police presence is even greater than in some, particularly down by where these boats are going to parade in, down by the Seine. And I was just yesterday just walking around, and there is an officer who's got his rifle and he's holding it kind of up in his arms like he's holding his baby. And I'm like, who are you? Why are you holding this thing like that? This is very intimidating. And I still feel a little bit frightened about just the heavy security presence.
Rick, what's one thing that won't make tomorrow's paper?
Earlier this week, Jerry and I went to the U.S. rugby team's press conference, and a foreign reporter asked one of the athletes there, this 33-year-old guy from Houston, Kayvon Williams, just asked him his thoughts on Joe Biden dropping out of the race and being replaced on the ticket, which kind of chuckled at the question. And so did the athletes up on the stage, and he kind of threw it back at the reporter, says, well, what do you think? And the guy said, seems kind of late. and Williams didn't miss a beat. He was like, yeah, I like what you said. So I just bring that up because it feels like the Olympics have an opportunity to not just distract us from a lot of things that are going on, but maybe kind of give us something to rally around. There's some kind of one collective thing that we can all kind of agree on for a few weeks. We can watch it together. It gives us all something to talk about. Not everyone has to root for the same athletes or the same countries, but we're all kind of having this shared experience. And I like that. And I don't mind if we tone down some of the political talk for a few weeks and catch our breath and just kind of focus on these athletic achievements and performances. Hopefully stuff that we're going to remember for a long time and talk about for a long time.
Yeah, like Jerry said, sitting side by side and watching beautiful things happen. That sounds pretty good.
That's what they hope.
It's all better with a bottle of wine in front of us. Next time Jerry and I come on this, I think we should have just a red and a white sitting on this table.
I think that sounds good. Okay.
Talk to the producers.
Jerry, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Ava.
And thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Jerry Brewer is a sports columnist, and Rick Maese is a sports features reporter for The Post. Before we go, even though the opening ceremonies are on Friday, there are sports starting today. So exciting, finally. The U.S. men's soccer team is opening competition against France at 3 p.m. Eastern, and rugby sevens, which is what we were talking about with Rick, starts at the Stade de France. The U.S. men are also opening against France at 10:30 a.m., but there's play throughout the day. And check out the other non-U.S. teams too, of course. That is it for the sports moment today. If you want more up-to-date information about the latest news from Paris, and there is so much news, so much going on in Paris, you should also subscribe to my newsletter, also called The Sports Moment. If you want to follow me on Instagram or on X, formerly known as Twitter, I don't know if we're still saying that, you can find links to all of those things there. The games are going on through August 11th. I will be in your ears as often as possible, so make sure you don't miss an episode. Subscribe to the Sports Moment feed wherever you listen. Today's episode was produced and mixed by Ted Muldoon. It was edited by Matt Rennie, Joe Tone, Renita Jablonski, and Allison Michaels. I'm Ava Wallace. See you next time from Paris.